For me, joining the military was really an escape from my problems. I grew up with a very abusive mother, and I just felt like I had to get out. And getting to be part of something so much bigger than myself, getting to have this purpose greater than any purpose in the world, inspired me in a way that I didn't know existed. I found myself on the Air Force Academy, and it was a time where everything just came back. I was hit with anxiety, depression, almost like it came out of nowhere. When my enlistment was up in 2003, I decided to get out and stay home with my children at the time. And having all that time to sit at home alone with my kids all day really started stirring up things in me that I hadn't dealt with from my past. It got to the point where I didn't want to be alive anymore, and that was really scary for me because I have so much to live for. Why don't I want to be here anymore? Why don't I care? And when I didn't know where to turn, I found myself in a serendipitous moment where I was invited by the manager of the Air Force Academy stables to adopt a baby wild Mustang. So he took me to a rescue in Falcon, Colorado, where there were just a whole herd of these baby Mustangs. And when I stepped through the gate, they all ran except for this one horse. She just stared at me. And when I turned to walk back in the barn, she followed. And I knew in that moment that my life would be changed forever. And I named her Shelby. It was a couple days later that Shelby was dropped off to the farm in the Air Force Academy, and we got to work right away. I was very blessed at the time to be working with some of the greatest horsemen in the country, and they started teaching me how to speak the language of the horse. And what that meant is that everything I communicated, I had to do nonverbal. That also meant that I had to gain control over my emotions when I was in the presence of this horse. If I'm an emotional train wreck, they're not gonna look at me, they're not gonna trust me, they're not even gonna wanna be around me. So in that process of gaining trust from this baby horse, I was able to start trusting myself. In turn, others started trusting me more. The way that I communicated in my relationships with my children and my friends and just my entire environment started to shift because I started to become in control of my emotions. Fast forward to 2005, I decided to move back to Ohio. I decided I needed to pick up the pieces, and I enrolled in college for business. And while I was in college, I wrote a business plan to own a horse farm. That had always been my dream. And got an A on the paper, stuck the business plan away in my drawer. And a couple months later, I was at my grandparents' for dinner, and my grandfather came to me one day and he said, "I found a horse farm for sale. It's in Grand Rapids, and I think you should go look at it." My initial response was, "Okay, Grandpa, I'm a single mom. I don't have any stability in my life. How could I ever afford this?" But I went anyway. The first time I pulled through the gate into the driveway, it just overwhelmingly felt like home. And I would go there and I would go into the arena and I would pray and I would try to bargain with God. "Okay, God, if you give me this farm, I'm going to use it to help people." And one day I got the idea to take my dad to lunch and offer him a business partnership. I was convinced that he would laugh at me, but throughout the conversation and after reviewing the business plan, he said, "Let's look into it." 6 weeks later, we moved into the farm. We started a boarding and training facility, and the boarding facility exploded almost overnight. Within 6 months, we had 40 horses, business was booming. I got back into the show world, and I started to realize that what I was doing was very self-serving, and I wasn't keeping my end of the bargain. I saw that this really wasn't what I wanted my life to be about, and I really learned that I wasn't necessarily helping people. And that was when I made the decision to shut everything down. During my time in Colorado, I extensively studied horse behavior and became a partner with the Bureau of Land Management. And they would travel around doing adoption fairs, and I would go to these fairs and I would give demonstrations on how to gentle wild horses. I was driving to this particular fairgrounds down in Cincinnati, and out of the blue I got a phone call from a guy I had never met before. He told me that there was a very special Mustang, and he asked if I could pick it up for him at this adoption fair. The lady who was supposed to take him had backed out. And of course I always have the trailer in case I see something I like. And I said, sure, no problem. So I brought him back to my farm, and this gentleman named Rob met me there. He started telling me about equine-assisted psychotherapy, and it was something I had never heard of before, but he was explaining how it's not for people who are necessarily handicapped, but have emotional problems, mental health problems, depression, anxiety. And as he was explaining to me how horses can help people emotionally, it was like putting the pieces of a puzzle together. I fully understood how my horse Shelby had helped me overcome all of my emotional issues. And I decided in that moment that this was my purpose, that I could help other people gain all the benefits that I had gotten from my Mustang. So I went right away and I took my first set of certifications so that I could practice as an equine psychotherapy practitioner. We launched the program in 2009 and officially became a certified 501c3 in 2011. And right when I thought everything was coming together, 2 days after Christmas, my dad passed away of a heart attack unexpectedly. My mom had called me. I had run to the store and my mom had called and said, hey, your dad's passed out in the barn. The ambulance is on its way. And I heard his voice, but it wasn't in my ears. It was with my heart. And I heard the words, this isn't about you or me. It's about part of a bigger plan. And I can help you more on the other side. I feel like it was that piece that allowed me to move on with the grace that I did, and to know somehow, I didn't know how it was going to be okay, but at the end of the day, that piece let me know that it would be. After we got through the funeral and everything, I got to the point where I realized that I wasn't going to be able to keep the farm, and I had to start liquidating. I had it on the market for 3 days and it sold. I did not expect to be out so fast. I thought we'd at least be there over the winter. So I had about 4 weeks to get out. I had 20 horses and a whole farm full of stuff. So I adopted out quite a few of my horses, and one of my great mentors called me 3 days before I had to be out, and he said, hey, why don't you bring your horses to my farm? After we got settled in at Steve's, I realized that it wasn't going to be practical to work with people one-on-one anymore. As a single mom, a full-time student, and working a full-time job, I thought if I'm going to help people, it's going to have to be in a group setting. What I didn't realize at the time is that was the biggest blessing in disguise. I decided I was going to take all 6 exercises, put them in one 8-hour day, and run it like a workshop. I only had 3 veterans show up for the very first session, and what came out of that day was so mind-blowing. I watched people heal deep-seated trauma and wounds that they had carried for 10 years in one day. And in that moment, I knew I had something so special that it would change the world. When we started doing the workshops, they were never in the same space. We went from Oregon to Swanton to Delta to Monclova, basically anywhere that we could find someone that would allow us to use their space for the day. While we were extremely grateful to be welcomed into other people's barns, it was an extreme workload to transport all the materials, all the horses, and get where we needed to be on time. It took 2 days to complete a one-day workshop. Some of the feedback I was getting from the veterans is that it was difficult to go an entire month between sessions. And so from that, the idea for the 3-day retreat was born. In January of 2017, I wrote our first strategic plan. We scheduled our very first 3-day veterans retreat for October. And at that time, I had no idea how it was going to come to fruition. We picked Maumee Bay State Park and OH Stables, and about 6 weeks out, we still didn't have the money to make it happen. I was ready to cancel the retreat because I just didn't see how we were going to get the funding, but something in my heart told me to just wait one more day. The following day, the Justin Karras Memorial Poker Run was held, and they wanted to do something in his memory and to help other veterans. Justin Karras was a Marine who sadly lost his life to suicide a year before. I showed up at the poker run knowing that I needed $6,000 to be able to make this retreat happen. And I just didn't think there was any way we were going to raise that kind of money. So I come into the event, I walk to the stage, and the girl on stage says, we just raised $6,000 for the Hooves program. Here's a microphone. And I think it was the first time I ugly cried in public. in front of a bunch of people I don't know. And it was such a special moment that Justin's uncle said, I'm gonna pass this tub around one more time because I think we can do better than $6,000, and I'm gonna match whatever's in this bucket at the end. And in 3 minutes, there was another $2,000 in the bucket, and we ended up leaving the event with $10,000. I just couldn't believe that this had happened for us and that we were gonna actually be able to save the lives of 10 other veterans and honor the life of Justin, who I never had the pleasure of meeting. That first retreat was the benchmark that made Hooves what it is today. In January of 2018, we were offered the opportunity to finally have our own space. We moved into a small 5-acre farm in White House, Ohio. We were able to work out a contract with Camp Courageous, which was a local camp down the road, to use their facility to house people while we had the retreat portion with the horses at the farm. The challenge we ran into is their programming runs from May through August, so we were unable to get the space for the majority of our summer retreats. Out of that challenge was born our own 4 rustic cabins, which we were able to build with the help of UPS. We literally had every piece of material that we needed dropped off to the farm within a matter of 2 weeks, and it was down to the minute, almost like one of those home renovation shows. We were decorating and finishing the cabins just as people were pulling in the driveway, but we pulled it off. We realized quickly that we were outgrowing the small space that we were in. I just felt in my heart like it was time to move on to the next level. I've learned that when you pray, you should be very specific, and I asked for 30 acres on Oak Openings, which is our local metro park, and to have a natural water source running through it. 2 weeks after I said my prayer, I received a call from Debbie Disbrow, who owns the farm that we're at now, and she said, hey, God put it on my heart to call you because I'm gonna sell my farm and I wanna offer it to you before I list it. While I was overcome with excitement, I also knew that we didn't have a budget to be able to afford this farm. But it was something that I just couldn't walk away from. It was everything I had prayed for. Why was this happening to me now when I didn't have the budget to pay for it? So I decided that I was gonna offer her a land contract. I really thought in my mind, people don't do land contracts anymore, especially not on a beautiful facility like this place is. But I thought, well, I can send her the proposal, she can tell me no, and I can at least move on with my life. So I sat down, I typed up a proposal, I sent it over email, and 2 days later she said yes. It was just in time to have our final retreat for the year at the new place. And I was able to rent some furniture from Rent-A-Center. We threw it all together, and it was by far the most magical retreat we had ever held. The difference here in this house is that nobody's going back to a separate room or a separate cabin, and the extra hours of interaction and camaraderie and bonding and relationships that were formed in this house literally just brought me to tears. I could not believe how special it was to have this retreat center and have a space where people can stay connected for the entire weekend. It was really a game changer for us. One of the biggest visions I have for this space is making it a part of the community. The Hooves program has experienced a remarkable amount of growth over the past 5 years, and we want to keep growing so that we can help more people.